That might be a version of what I like to call semi-retirement, where someone is maybe choosing to leave their full-time job early, but yet not at a point where they want to stop working. They just want a little bit more flexibility or freedom in their work life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Podcast. And we call it that because that's exactly what it is. It's a show about real finance for real people. We often get asked at Stonehouse, who do you work with, what kind of clients? And the term I always like to use is blue collar wealth. Most of our clients have anywhere from $500,000 to many millions of dollars saved up in their retirement, but they don't necessarily care about buying a giant yacht and sailing it to the south of France. Instead, most of our clients ask us about how can I squeeze more juice out of my retirement and how can I live a long, healthy, happy life. So my name is Bob Brown. I'm a certified financial planner here, and I'm a founding partner at Stonehouse Retirement Income Planners. I've had the privilege of helping many families plan and live their lives for over 20-some years now, and I'm part of a growing team here at Stonehouse, and we've seen our clients go through a lot of things in their lives. And now, thanks to the power of the podcast, we can share some of those stories with you and maybe even share some shortcuts to hopefully get you on track or stay on track with your own finances. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to retire sooner and regain your freedom. You may very well be feeling overwhelmed at your job or just burned out on your career. And maybe, just maybe, you've been frustrated because you can't seem to make the math work. Your heart is telling you to move on to that full retirement stage of the next stage of your life, but your mind knows that it's a little too early. Or maybe you feel like there's still a lot of energy and brain power left in your tank. You're not alone in this. There's a bunch of people out there just like you who are trying to bridge that gap between full-time work and full-time retirement. Well, by the end of this podcast, I hope that we're able to get you to a better place where you can maybe start thinking out of the box. Stop believing that your options are only all in or all out, and maybe you can start planning your early exit from where you are today and move one step closer to regaining your freedom. To help me discuss retiring sooner with you today, I've brought in Kirk Lunger. Kirk is a senior advisor at Stonehouse and has years of experience working with people just like you who are anxiously searching for a way to retire sooner. So here we are, Kirk Lunger. Thanks for joining me today. We talk to a lot of people, and you see this a lot. I know you do, especially you work with a lot of P&G folks, and you often have a conversation right off the bat of somebody who says, I really don't think, or I'm not sure if I have enough to retire, but I really want to go to that next chapter in my life. I need to make a change in my life. So they throw it all to you and say, how can you make this work? What's the magic pill? So where do you start when something like that happens?
Sure. You're going to really start by taking a look at what are their income needs. In our office, we call it cash flow, but for a lot of folks, that might be a term you're not as familiar with. Basically, what it is looking at what amount of income are you living off of today, and then how much of that do we need to replace in your retirement? So if there is a gap where your original plan was thinking, I might like to work till I'm 60 to 65, but here I am in my mid to late 50s and I'm just feeling burned out, fatigued, frustrated, any of those things, and just saying, I'm one to see where my plan is today. Where we're going to start is looking at what amount of income do you need to keep your lifestyle comfortable. The reason for that is most likely in that scenario, depending upon your income, we're going to look to see then where is that going to be replaced from. So if someone is under 62 and not disabled, they're not eligible to start receiving Social Security that they've paid into for presumably several decades. Right. So you're living off your nest egg. So where retiring earlier than expected comes in is looking at that income need to say, if I don't quite have a nest egg that's sizable enough to keep my lifestyle as comfortable, and I don't want to just tighten the belt, what are some things I could consider doing? For a lot of our clients, it might be at a point in their retirement where in their earlier days, they may still have a desire and energy to continue working, but not in a full-time capacity where they are today, where they might have limited flexibility. As we've joked about in our office, the F word, in your work life, you might have a limited amount of that today. You might be feeling that, I have a lot of time off on paper, but I can't ever use it because, well, so-and-so is already off, or we can only have so many off in your region. And you're just feeling like, I'm starting to get burned out. And so I'm looking for a new chapter, and that might be a version of what I like to call semi-retirement, where someone is maybe choosing to leave their full-time job early, but yet not at a point where they want to stop working. They just want a little bit more flexibility or freedom in their work life. So for a lot of folks, depending upon their skill sets and background, this might be part-time work. It could be with your current employer if they allowed it for a reduced work schedule, or it may be leveraging other skill sets. Maybe you have a hobby that you could turn into a small business. Maybe there's someone that that runs a construction business and is always dealing with turnover, and you're handy and have always been easy to find things that you enjoy doing in that space. So you could leverage your skills to say, well, maybe I want to work for them at a reduced capacity that gives you the income to help supplement your retirement distributions before you get fully retired later on. So that gap could be minimized by saying, well, even if my nest egg isn't enough to replace all of the income that I'm earning today, well, maybe I'm able to reduce that from part-time work. In our area, in the Northeast PA region, in the Marcellus gas country, gas royalties is another aspect that can help subsidize income in retirement. Generally, we try and treat that with blinders on, that we don't look at it because we know we can't count on it as guaranteed.
Sure.
However, it can't be ignored either in the context of if it remains, it could be a big component to help bridge that gap. I wouldn't want someone to see a plan that says, I'm going to leave my job full-time and just bank on my gas royalty income at 42.
Yeah. That would be a disaster, right.
But, it's very possible that someone could use it as a supplemental income source along with part-time work, or potentially a spouse who's going to continue to work full-time. So that income need is very crucial, because a lot of times we find clients that as they get closer to retirement, their children maybe come off the payroll, so to speak, their expenses are less.
I like that.
They might get some debt paid down, and then you might be at a spot where you say, well, boy, my wages that I generate, I'm saving more money than I ever have. So maybe my income need is a lot less, where take a hypothetical salary of someone making $75,000 to $85,000 a year, but maybe I'm only spending my net pay of roughly 50% of what I make. So equivalently, I might only need to find a job that pays me half as much as what I'm making full time.
Right.
So now then the question is, well, how much will I have to work, and what do those prospects look like to say, well, could I leave the workforce sooner than I expected?
Yeah, I would also add to that, like what you just talked about is all the math, and that has to be all there first, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting, the psychological part of this, right? So one of the really interesting stories and feedback we have from one of our clients when I interviewed him a few years ago was he talked very openly about how he's a very bright guy, had a great job, and did tons of planning. And yet the one thing he did not see coming was that he was retired and his wife was still working for a few more years. And it took him, he said, his words, not mine, it took him 3 years roughly to feel at peace with that. And so when you mentioned it just a second ago, if you have a spouse that's still working, and that happens a lot, he or she retires before the other, and the next thing you know, someone's literally home by themselves, and they're not used to that. And psychologically, and to that client's point, it was very hard for him to feel the same value. Like in his mind, his value was always, I earn a chunk of our income, and now all of a sudden, he even joked at the end, it was like at like 3 p.m, an hour or so before his wife would come home, he'd run out in the garage and try to pretend like he did something for the day. And I thought that was a hilarious story. I'm glad he shared it. But I think that happens more than not. One spouse retires early, and then it might be miserable for the person staying at home, but it might actually be miserable for the person who's still working, or both. And so it's a really delicate balance that they got to work out.
I think there's something, too, we see often working with a significant majority of Procter & Gamble retirees in swing shift. So I've seen it with a lot of spouses in a similar but different scenario than that, where someone's now home a lot more than what they were, because in a swing shift schedule locally here where you run a 2-2-3 between days and nights, you eventually get used to your partner maybe not being there at night because they're working. Very different than a traditional employee who says, I work 9 to 5, as we are fortunate to have jobs that look similar to that where, when we go home, if our spouse works a similar schedule, we're used to similar schedules, where the rotation of the P&G shift schedule can have a lot of adjustments for folks in retirement when the P&G spouse then has more 9 to 5 type of time frame versus every other weekend I'm working. I'm on night shift on Tuesday and Wednesday. So, there's just a lifestyle change that goes into it, whether someone has a 9 to 5 or a swing shift schedule, that you have a work family. I have a work family today, and they play a big part of your life. And then when you retire, now your immediate family, then you have more time with. So adjusting to that new life dynamic is something that I think isn't factored in enough as to what's going to consume your time. If you're working 40 hours a week, regardless of when that is in a given week, you now need to replace that. You're no longer working 8 or 12 hours. You now have something else to do. And I don't think everyone factors that in, especially if you're retiring earlier than anticipated, of what is my day going to look like? Sticking to a schedule and a routine is something I found that really helps clients keep a very successful retirement, because other times boredom can sometimes creep in, and in certain circumstances when that happens, we tend to spend money. And then you can now unintentionally shoot yourself in the foot by not thinking about what am I going to do with my time when I'm not going to work at this set frequency. So I think retiring early, besides the math and the numbers of can I do it, there's 100% a huge psychological component of, am I ready? Some folks are definitely ready because work is pushing them quicker to be that way. And then others are sometimes the opposite, which is they may fail at retirement 3 or 4 times, not because they've ran out of money, but because they can't stop working. I've had a few clients that have joked with that. They said, I've tried to retire 3 times and I've failed every time.
Yeah, it's actually a big thing. I have a big issue with that. I'm really concerned about that. I've just always worked. Even when, even at
and that's
home at
okay,
night.
Because I think part of our job can be building out things that you enjoy doing that then it doesn't feel like work. Where, it can be a passion, where some folks have what I call a job, which is, look, I make an income. It might be a very, very good income. It might even be a refined skill that you have to have a specialized education for, but it might not be fulfilling you internally that says it really is something I'm passionate for. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's volunteering or, your local church, or something that you're really passionate about that you do as a hobby now that you might enjoy doing more frequently in retirement, whether you can make money at it or not. I think that's the component of, what do you want to spend your time on? And then you can build your financial plan around it to say, does this work?
Right. Yeah, I would say that there's more than one client. I can think of probably 5 or 6 right off the top of my head who I think sort of found a gold nugget in that they relocated. Like, they moved to warmer climates, right? And when they did that, they took part-time work at not highly skilled jobs. They'll be the first to tell you they did it because of the social aspect. They would meet a lot of people in that area. They would learn about the area. They would talk to people. They would make friends easier. And so the first year or two, they just did that. And they physically and mentally are totally fine with it. And they feared being stagnant and not knowing how to fill up their day. So, working part-time and then having all that extra time, way more than we have today when we're working full-time.
It keeps you mentally sharp. Being in the workforce, whether you're working at a local distributor and stocking shelves, or, you're a highly skilled person with a specialized skill set, there's still something that every day you're contributing to, whether you're on the lower end or higher end of the pay scale, regardless of what that need is for you at the time. It keeps your mind active and going. And I think there's a lot of studies proving that the longer you do that, the longer life you probably will live by staying sharp versus just sitting on the porch and watching the sun rise and set.
Yeah, I would like to do that like once. One day, once in a while, right?
Right.
But, yeah. So, this has been great, and I think what you're showing is that there's a lot more. It's more than the math, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so. I guess the one thing I'll close with, or I'll ask you to close with, is when people are looking for to retire sooner. They, like we talked about earlier, they're just kind of on the edge of their seat. They want this to work so badly. I guess your point is thinking outside the box. Don't be so concerned. Like most of us, when we get, on the peak of approaching the finish line when it comes to, going into retirement, we're probably at our peak earnings. We're in some sort of a job or position that we're using our skill sets that are finely tuned, and that's kind of maxed out. And I think your point is, if you want to retire that badly, and now is the time, don't think you have to exit that job, and if you do part-time, that it has to be the same level of quality or the same level of compensation as it doesn't. It could, per your point, there could be a lot of reasons that you can only need to make a half or a quarter of that amount, and maybe enjoy it more and have more time, as you said, pre-retirement. I think is that the word you used?
Semi-retirement.
Semi-retirement.
So it needs to work for you, and
Yes.
I think that's the main thing. Like most things in our jobs, it has to be tailored to your circumstance.
Right.
So when I think about that for a semi-retiree, it may be watching your grandchildren. It may be volunteering. It may be working part-time, or guess what? All of the above.
Yeah.
It's the capacity to say you could still generate income, because I can tell you, as doing this long as I have, cash flow in retirement or income in retirement is the greatest asset you can have to deleverage yourself from just stock and bond performance. So the ability to generate income for longer can sometimes be of greater value than saying, I'm going to work 2 more years full time. I might have someone come in who's in their mid-50s saying, I don't know if I could work 10 more years, but maybe we craft a plan that says, well, what if you looked or started to pursue and look for an opportunity that said, well, could you take a job somewhere else, even if it was at a lower pay scale, but do it for longer, generating less income, could actually be financially more beneficial than just working 2 years longer full time when you say, that's it, I'm done, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is run your numbers, know what's the most important to you, and start thinking about what those priorities are from both a work and a personal side, and how can you achieve it. Because the one thing we have is our time, and we can't get it back. Yesterday's over, the last hour is over. So what am I going to do going forward? What's most important to me, and how do I achieve it?
All right, well, that sounds like a perfect segue to wrapping it up. Sounds like I could go on to something, the next thing in my day. So I thank you very much for doing this with me, Kirk. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. And for those of you who are watching, hopefully we've uncovered some great opportunities for you to think about. If you are on the cusp of retiring or anywhere close to it, and you're looking at how to bridge that gap, or even wondering if your numbers do match, your math works out for you. If you haven't done it on your own and you're looking for a source to help you, that's what we do here all the time, 24/7. Maybe not 24/7, but we do it a lot of hours in the day. So give us a call at Stonehouse. One of our advisors would love to help you, and we hope this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.